Most acts of courage never make headlines. They happen quietly, in ordinary places, witnessed by only a handful of people before being forgotten. But every once in a while, a single decision changes everything. At Lincoln Heights High School, 17-year-old Jamal Carter had spent years avoiding attention. He wasn't a star athlete, a class president, or someone who actively sought recognition. He was simply a student trying to get through his final year without trouble. That changed one afternoon when he witnessed 6 students surrounding a lone biker outside school grounds. While dozens of people watched from a distance, Jamal made a choice that lasted less than 10 seconds. What happened afterward would transform his life, expose a growing problem within the school, and eventually become a story discussed across the entire country. Lincoln Heights High School sat on the edge of a growing Midwestern city where old neighborhoods blended uneasily with new development. The school itself was large, diverse, and generally well regarded. On paper, it appeared successful. Graduation rates were strong. Athletic programs received consistent recognition. Parents frequently praised the administration's commitment to student achievement. Like many schools, however, the image presented to the public didn't always reflect daily reality. Beneath the banners celebrating academic excellence and championship victories, a different culture had slowly taken root among certain groups of students. Most people recognized its existence. Few openly discussed it. Jamal Carter certainly noticed it. At 17, Jamal had developed a reputation for staying out of conflict. He earned respectable grades, worked part-time at a grocery store on weekends, and spent most afternoons helping his younger brother with homework. Teachers appreciated his maturity. Classmates generally liked him. Yet despite his quiet nature, Jamal possessed something many people underestimated. He paid attention. He noticed which students were routinely mocked in the cafeteria. He noticed who changed routes between classes to avoid certain hallways. He noticed the subtle ways fear influenced behavior throughout the building. The problem wasn't that Lincoln Heights lacked good students. The problem was that a small group of aggressive students had become comfortable operating without consequences. Their leader was a senior named Tyler Brooks. Tall, athletic, and popular, Tyler knew exactly how much influence he carried. Coaches valued his performance on the football field. Younger students admired him. Many teachers viewed him as confident rather than intimidating. Those perceptions benefited him, because confidence and intimidation often looked surprisingly similar from a distance. Tyler rarely acted alone. 5 close friends moved through the school with him almost constantly. Together, they controlled social circles, dominated conversations, and frequently targeted students they viewed as weak. Most incidents never escalated into serious violence. That fact allowed adults to dismiss concerns. It's just teenagers. They'll grow out of it, ignore them, and they'll stop. Students heard those phrases constantly. Reality proved far different. Ignoring bullies rarely made them stop. It usually made them bolder. One Wednesday afternoon, Jamal witnessed an example firsthand. A freshman carrying a stack of textbooks accidentally bumped shoulders with one of Tyler's friends near the science wing. The collision was harmless, completely accidental. Yet within seconds, the younger student found himself surrounded. The group laughed, mocked him, demanded an apology for something that clearly wasn't his fault. Students walking past pretended not to notice. Others slowed down briefly before continuing on. Jamal watched the interaction from the opposite side of the hallway. His jaw tightened. Part of him wanted to intervene. Another part understood the risks. People who challenged Tyler's group often became targets themselves. Eventually, a teacher emerged from a nearby classroom, causing the confrontation to dissolve immediately. The 6 students walked away laughing while the freshman hurried toward class with his head lowered. The entire incident lasted less than 2 minutes. Long enough to leave an impression, short enough to avoid disciplinary action. As usual, later that afternoon, Jamal sat beneath a tree near the student parking lot, waiting for his younger brother Malik to finish soccer practice at the middle school nearby. While scrolling through messages on his phone, he noticed a familiar pattern unfolding across the street. Tyler and several friends stood outside a convenience store. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then Jamal saw them begin harassing an older man exiting the building. The comments weren't loud enough to hear clearly. The body language told the story anyway. Mocking, provoking, looking for a reaction. After a few moments, the man simply ignored them and walked away. Tyler's group erupted with laughter. Jamal shook his head. The behavior wasn't surprising anymore. That realization bothered him more than the incident itself. Because somewhere along the way, intimidation had become normal, accepted, expected, and whenever harmful behavior becomes normal, it almost always grows worse. At the time, Jamal had no way of knowing just how accurate that thought would prove. Within days, those same 6 students would push their behavior further than ever before. And when they did, a chance encounter outside school grounds would place Jamal at the center of a story no one could have predicted. Tyler's group had spent years testing boundaries without consequences. Soon, they would encounter someone they never expected, and Jamal would be forced to make a choice. As another school week came to an end, a routine walk home was about to place Jamal directly in the path of a confrontation that would change everything. Friday arrived with the restless energy that always seemed to sweep through Lincoln Heights High School at the end of a week. Classrooms felt louder. Students paid less attention to lectures. Conversations about weekend plans spread through hallways long before the final bell. For most students, the day passed without incident. For Jamal Carter, however, something felt different. It wasn't a specific event, more of a feeling, an uneasiness he couldn't fully explain. During lunch, he noticed Tyler Brooks and his group occupying their usual table near the center of the cafeteria. As always, they controlled the atmosphere around them. Students laughed when they expected laughter. Conversations changed when they approached. Few people challenged them openly. Power often worked that way, not through force alone, through influence. And influence could be surprisingly dangerous in the wrong hands. Across the room, Jamal watched Tyler record a short video on his phone while several friends crowded around him. Whatever they were filming appeared entertaining enough to earn loud reactions from nearby students. A few minutes later, one of Tyler's friends shoved a sophomore boy from behind as he walked past their table. The student stumbled. Food nearly spilled. Tyler's group laughed. The boy glanced around the cafeteria before continuing without saying a word. Jamal noticed something that bothered him. Nobody seemed surprised. Not the students, not the staff, not even the victim. As though everyone had silently accepted that this was simply how things worked. That realization lingered in his mind throughout the afternoon. When the final bell rang, students poured from classrooms and flooded the parking lot surrounding the school. Jamal collected his backpack and began the familiar walk toward the bus stop where he usually met Malik after practice. The route took him past several small businesses located near the edge of campus. A coffee shop, a farmacie, a convenience store. Nothing unusual, at least not initially. Halfway down the block, he noticed a crowd gathering near the convenience store parking lot. People weren't close enough to intervene, yet they weren't leaving either. They were watching. Whenever groups of strangers stop walking and begin staring at something, it usually means trouble. Jamal slowed his pace. The scene gradually came into focus. 6 teenagers stood near the parking lot entrance. Tyler and his friends, the same 6 students who dominated the hallways of Lincoln Heights. Facing them stood a man beside a large black motorcycle. He appeared to be somewhere in his late 50s. Broad shoulders, gray beard, weathered face, a leather riding vest stretched over a dark shirt. The motorcycle beside him looked expensive, well-maintained, powerful. The man remained calm. The 6 teenagers did not, even from a distance. Jamal could tell they were provoking him. One circled behind the motorcycle. Another pointed a phone camera directly at the rider. Someone else shoved the front tire with his foot. The crowd around them continued growing. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody told them to stop. Everyone watched. The biker folded his arms. At first, he appeared willing to ignore the harassment. Then Tyler stepped closer. Too close. The smile on his face revealed exactly what he wanted. A reaction? Any reaction? Because people like Tyler often confuse self-control with weakness. And the biker's patience looked like weakness to them. Jamal felt frustration building. The situation reminded him of every hallway incident he had witnessed throughout the year. Different location. Same behavior. 6 people targeting one person because they believed there would be no consequences. The biker finally spoke. Jamal couldn't hear the words. But whatever he said caused Tyler's smile to widen. Several of his friends laughed. Then one of them slapped the motorcycle seat. Another grabbed the handlebar. The crowd reacted immediately. A few gasps echoed through the parking lot. Something had changed. The situation was no longer verbal, and everyone knew it. The biker took a single step forward. Not aggressively. Firmly. A warning. For a moment, silence settled across the crowd. Then Tyler shoved him. The movement wasn't especially hard, but it crossed a line. The biker stumbled half a step backward. Several people lifted their phones higher. Recording. Watching. Waiting. Still, nobody intervened. Jamal looked around. Adults stood nearby. College students. Customers exiting businesses. Drivers sitting in parked cars. Dozens of people. Yet nobody moved. The realization hit him hard. Everyone expected someone else to act. And when everyone expects someone else to act, nobody does. For a brief moment, Jamal hesitated. He wasn't looking for trouble. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't even sure what he could accomplish against 6 aggressive teenagers. Then he looked at the biker again. Alone. Surrounded. Outnumbered. And suddenly the decision became simple. Because some situations leave no room for comfortable neutrality. Jamal tightened the straps of his backpack and started walking toward the confrontation. Without realizing it, he was moving toward the moment that would eventually change his life. The crowd kept watching. The 6 bullies kept pushing. And Jamal had just decided to do what nobody else was willing to do. As tensions exploded in the parking lot, a confrontation that seemed destined for violence was only seconds away, and Jamal was about to step directly into the middle of it. By the time Jamal reached the edge of the parking lot, the atmosphere had changed completely. What had started as harassment was rapidly turning into something more serious. The crowd sensed it. That was why nobody was leaving. People often claim they dislike conflict. Yet many are strangely drawn to it when they believe they can watch from a safe distance. Around 30 students and adults had gathered near the convenience store by then. Some recorded with their phones. Others whispered among themselves. A few appeared uncomfortable. Still, nobody stepped forward. In the center of the growing circle stood the biker, Alone. 6 teenagers surrounded him. Tyler Brooks remained closest. The grin that had entertained his friends minutes earlier was beginning to fade. The biker's refusal to react the way they expected seemed to frustrate him. Bullies often depend on control. When control disappears, they become unpredictable. "You think you're tough?" Tyler asked loudly. Several of his friends laughed. The biker didn't respond. "Look at him." Another teenager said, "He's scared." That statement wasn't true, even from a distance. Jamal could see it. The older man wasn't afraid. He was patient. There was a difference, a significant one. The biker glanced toward the group and spoke calmly. "You boys should leave." The words carried no anger, no threat, just certainty. Unfortunately, certainty often irritates people determined to prove themselves. Tyler stepped closer again. "So make us..." A few members of the crowd exchanged nervous looks. The situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. The biker sighed, not dramatically, more like someone who had seen this kind of behavior many times before. For a brief moment, Jamal considered calling the police. Then he noticed something else. One of Tyler's friends had moved behind the biker. Another stood near the motorcycle. The group was positioning themselves, closing in, like a pack testing boundaries. Jamal felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't posturing anymore. It was escalation. And escalation rarely ends well. A voice inside his head told him to stay out of it. Walk away. Let someone else handle the situation. The advice made sense. Objectively, it was probably the safer choice. But another thought quickly followed. What if everyone else was having the exact same thought? The answer was obvious. Nothing would happen. Nobody would help. The biker would remain alone. Jamal suddenly remembered something his grandfather once told him years earlier. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's deciding something else matters more than your fear. At the time, the lesson had sounded simple. Standing in that parking lot. It felt far more complicated. Across the circle, Tyler apparently reached a decision. His expression hardened. The performance was over. He wanted action. Without warning, he shoved the biker again. Harder this time. The older man took a step backward. Before he could regain his footing, another teenager moved forward. Then another. The crowd erupted. Some shouted. Others gasped. Several people instinctively backed away. Everything happened at once. And for a fraction of a second, nobody moved. Except Jamel. His body reacted before his mind fully caught up. He dropped his backpack, pushed through the outer edge of the crowd, and headed directly toward the confrontation. Later, when reporters asked what he was thinking in that moment, Jamal would struggle to answer. Because the truth was surprisingly simple. He wasn't thinking about becoming a hero. He wasn't thinking about recognition. He wasn't thinking at all. He just knew somebody needed to do something, and nobody else was doing it. As he moved closer, Tyler's group remained focused entirely on the biker. None of them noticed Jamal approaching. Not yet. The biker did. For the first time since the confrontation began, the older man's expression changed slightly. His eyes narrowed, not in concern, in curiosity, as though he were trying to understand why a teenager was suddenly walking towards 6 aggressive students. Jamal wasn't entirely sure himself. What he did know was that the next few seconds would determine how this situation ended. And whether someone got seriously hurt, the crowd held its breath. Phones remained raised. Voices faded. The tension became almost physical. Because everyone understood something important, the confrontation had reached a point of no return. 6 bullies thought they had complete control of the situation. They didn't realize a single decision from one student was about to change everything. The moment violence finally erupted, Jamal acted without hesitation. What happened over the next 8 seconds would soon be viewed millions of times across the country. The first punch never landed. Years later, when people watched the video online, many would assume the confrontation exploded into a prolonged fight. The reality was very different. It lasted less than 8 seconds. The moment Tyler moved toward the biker, Jamal stepped between them. Back up? The words weren't shouted, yet they carried enough force to make everyone pause. For a split second, even Tyler seemed surprised. Then he laughed. "Are you serious?" Jamal didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the group. The crowd around them grew silent. Nobody expected a 17-year-old student to walk directly into a situation most adults were avoiding. Tyler's friends reacted immediately. One moved forward. Another circled slightly to the side. The behavior was familiar. Pack mentality. Strength through numbers. Unfortunately for them, the crowd was no longer seeing 6 confident students. They were seeing 6 teenagers surrounding 2 people. The image looked much different. Tyler shoved Jamal's shoulder. "Hard. Move." Jamal held his ground. The shove achieved nothing. For the first time all afternoon, uncertainty flickered across Tyler's face. Bullies depend on predictable outcomes. Jamal wasn't behaving predictably. The second shove came faster, more aggressive. Again, Jamal refused to move. The crowd erupted with nervous reactions. Several people shouted for someone to call the police. Others continued filming. Then everything happened at once. One of Tyler's friends lunged forward. Another grabbed at Jamal's backpack strap. A third moved toward the biker. The next 8 seconds changed everything. Jamal reacted instinctively. He pushed one student away. stepped between another and the biker, forced enough distance to break the group's momentum. The biker simultaneously moved to his side. Suddenly, the 6 students found themselves facing 2 calm opponents instead of a single isolated target. The psychological advantage vanished instantly, without momentum, without surprise, without fear controlling the situation. The group hesitated. That hesitation was all it took. A loud voice cut through the parking lot. Police are coming, nobody knew who yelled it. The effect was immediate. Reality crashed into the moment. Phones, witnesses, cameras, consequences. Tyler looked around and finally seemed to understand how bad the situation had become. Within seconds, the group began backing away. Not running, not yet, but retreating. The confrontation was over. The crowd exhaled collectively. The disaster had been avoided. At least, that's what everyone believed. Nobody knew the video had already begun spreading online. And nobody knew that one particular viewer would soon change the entire story. The confrontation lasted less than 8 seconds. But hundreds of cameras captured every moment. The footage was already traveling far beyond Lincoln Heights. While students discussed the incident over the weekend, the video reached someone who immediately recognized the man standing beside Jamal. By Saturday morning, the video had accumulated more than 50,000 views. By afternoon, that number doubled. Nobody expected it. After all, videos of school fights appeared online every day. Most disappeared within hours. This one didn't. The reason became clear when a popular local community page reposted the footage. The caption was simple: "Teen steps in to stop 6 bullies from attacking an older man." The story resonated immediately. Comments flooded in. Many praised Jamal. Others criticized the crowd for doing nothing. Some focused on the biker himself. Who was he? Why had 6 teenagers targeted him? The questions multiplied throughout the weekend. Meanwhile, Jamal remained completely unaware. His attention was focused elsewhere. Monday was coming. And Monday meant school. The incident had happened in front of dozens of students. There was no chance people would forget. His prediction proved accurate. The moment he entered Lincoln Heights Monday morning, students stared. Conversations stopped. Phones appeared. People whispered. Several students approached him before first period. "You're the guy from the video. I saw it online." "Dude, that's crazy." Jamal hated attention. Unfortunately, attention had found him. Elsewhere in the building, Tyler Brooks faced a very different experience. Students no longer viewed him as untouchable. The video had damaged something far more valuable than popularity: his image. For years, people saw confidence. Now they saw intimidation. The difference mattered. Teachers noticed it too. Administrators had already begun asking questions. Witness statements were collected. Parents were making phone calls. The situation wasn't going away. Then, shortly after lunch, something unexpected happened. A black motorcycle rolled into the visitor parking lot. Several students immediately recognized it. The biker had returned home. This time he wasn't alone. The mysterious biker had come back to Lincoln Heights, and he wasn't there to cause trouble. As students gathered near the front office, the true identity of the man from the viral video was finally about to be revealed. Word spread through the building within minutes. The biker from the video was meeting with school administrators. Naturally, speculation exploded. Some students assumed he planned to press charges. Others believed he was a retired police officer. A few created increasingly ridiculous theories that spread across social media before lunch ended. The truth surprised everyone, especially Jamal. Near the end of the school day, Principal Harper requested that Jamal report to the administrative office. The request immediately made him nervous. He replayed Friday's events while walking down the hallway. Had he broken a rule, was he in trouble? The uncertainty followed him all the way to the office door. Inside, he found Principal Harper sitting beside the biker. The older man smiled the moment Jamal entered. "Good to see you again." Jamal nodded awkwardly. "You too. Sir?" Principal Harper gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." For several moments, nobody spoke. Then the biker extended his hand. "My name is Robert Hayes." Jamal shook it. What happened next caught him completely off guard. Robert reached into a folder and placed several photographs on the desk. The images showed dozens of teenagers, community events, youth workshops, mentorship programs, scholarship ceremonies. "This is what I do," Robert explained. Jamal studied the pictures. Confused, Robert smiled. "I run one of the largest youth mentorship organizations in the state." The room fell silent. Even Principal Harper appeared impressed. Over the past 15 years, Robert's nonprofit had helped thousands of at-risk teenagers graduate high school, obtain scholarships, and avoid criminal involvement. Several national organizations partnered with his foundation. Major media outlets had featured his work. And somehow, none of that had been mentioned online. People saw a biker. They assumed they knew the story. They were wrong. Robert leaned forward. Friday wasn't the important part. Jamal frowned. It wasn't, no. The older man smiled. The important part was that you acted when everyone else froze. For a moment, Jamal didn't know what to say, because he still didn't see himself as brave. He saw himself as someone who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. But Robert clearly disagreed. And very soon, the rest of the country would too. Jamal thought he had helped an ordinary biker. He was about to learn that Robert Hayes was known by millions of people across the country. As national media discovered the viral video and Robert publicly shared Jamal's story, Lincoln Heights High found itself at the center of unexpected attention. By Tuesday morning, the story had moved far beyond the convenience store parking lot, where it began. When Jamal Carter woke up and checked his phone before school, he immediately noticed something unusual. Notifications filled the screen. Messages from classmates, messages from relatives, messages from people he barely knew. The video was everywhere. Overnight, several major social media pages had reposted the footage. Community groups shared it. Local news stations uploaded their own versions. Comment sections exploded with debate. The strange part wasn't the confrontation itself. The strange part was what people kept focusing on. Most viral videos involving teenagers centered around violence. Fights attracted attention. Chaos attracted clicks. This video was different. Millions of viewers weren't talking about punches. They were talking about courage. Specifically, they were asking the same question. Why had one 17-year-old student stepped forward when dozens of adults stood by and watched? The question followed Jamal all the way to school. The moment he entered Lincoln Heights High School, he realized things had changed. Students stared. Conversations stopped. Phones appeared. People whispered as he walked past. Jamal hated attention. Unfortunately, tension seemed impossible to avoid. Near his locker, several underclassmen approached nervously. "Hey, you're the guy from the video." "Right." Jamal forced a smile. "I guess." "Dude, that was amazing." Another student nodded enthusiastically. "I don't think I could have done that." The compliment made Jamal uncomfortable because he still didn't see himself as brave. Every time he replayed the event in his mind, he remembered how scared he actually felt. His heart racing. His uncertainty. The voice inside his head telling him to stay out of it. People watching the video only saw the final decision. They didn't see the fear that came before it. And maybe that was the biggest misunderstanding about courage. Most courageous people aren't fearless. They simply act despite being afraid. Throughout the morning, reactions continued. Teachers mentioned the incident before class. Several stopped him in hallways. Others simply offered approving nods. One history teacher shook his hand and quietly said, "You reminded people what integrity looks like." The comment stayed with Jamal long after the conversation ended. Meanwhile, the same attention affecting Jamal was having a very different impact elsewhere in the building. Tyler Brooks sat through first period, staring at his desk. For the first time in years, he wasn't receiving admiration. He wasn't controlling conversations. He wasn't the center of positive attention. Instead, students were talking about him in ways he couldn't control. The viral footage looked bad. Very bad. Watching the video online was different from experiencing the moment in person. Viewed from a distance, the scene appeared unmistakable. 6 teenagers surrounding 2 individuals. Aggressive body language. Escalating intimidation. Crowds watching. The optics were terrible. Even worse, people were beginning to ask questions. Former students shared stories. Current students shared experiences. Parents began contacting administrators. What initially seemed like one isolated confrontation was evolving into something much larger. By lunchtime, local reporters had started contacting the school. The administration issued a brief statement confirming that an internal review was underway. That announcement only fueled further interest. Students gathered around phones in the cafeteria. View counts continued climbing. 3 million. 4 million. 5 million. The numbers felt unreal. At another table, Tyler and several friends sat together in unusual silence. For years, they had controlled social dynamics inside Lincoln Heights. Now those dynamics were shifting. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to make them nervous. For perhaps the first time, students weren't laughing because Tyler wanted them to laugh. They were questioning him, avoiding him, watching him, and Tyler clearly hated it. Late that afternoon, Jamal finally escaped the attention by heading toward the library. He found a quiet corner and opened a textbook. For nearly 15 peaceful minutes, nobody interrupted him. Then Principal Harper appeared. The expression on her face immediately suggested something important. Jamal, he looked up. Yes, ma'am, she smiled. Someone is here to see you. Jamal frowned. A reporter? No. The principal's smile widened slightly. Someone much more interesting. Jamal followed her toward the administrative offices. As they walked, students continued staring. Neither of them noticed. Because waiting inside the conference room was a conversation that would soon push this story onto an even larger stage. And once that happened, Lincoln Heights High School would never quite be the same again. The viral video had already reached millions. But the person waiting inside the school office had the power to take Jamal's story nationwide. As reporters searched for headlines and students debated the video's meaning, Robert Hayes prepared to reveal a truth that would surprise everyone, including Jamal himself. The conference room felt unusually quiet as Jamal stepped inside. After spending an entire day surrounded by whispers and constant attention, the silence almost seemed strange. Robert Hayes stood near the window overlooking the front parking lot. Sunlight reflected against the glass behind him, outlining the broad frame that had become instantly recognizable to millions of viewers over the past few days. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Robert smiled. Good to see you again, Jamal. Jamal nodded. You too, sir. Principal Harper closed the door behind them before taking a seat at the far end of the table. Something about the atmosphere suggested this wasn't a casual meeting. Jamal felt it immediately. The older man motioned toward a chair. Please sit. Jamal did. Robert studied him for several seconds, not in an uncomfortable way. More like someone trying to understand a person beyond the headlines, beyond the viral clips, beyond the attention. Eventually, he spoke. How are you handling all of this? The question caught Jamal off guard. Most people wanted to discuss the video, the confrontation, the attention. Very few had asked how he was actually feeling. Jamal shrugged. It's weird. Robert laughed softly. That's probably the most honest answer I've heard all week. Even Principal Harper smiled. The tension eased slightly. Then Robert opened a folder resting on the table. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Jamal leaned forward. At first glance, they appeared unrelated. Teenagers standing beside mentors. Graduation ceremonies. Community service projects. Scholarship presentations. Leadership camps. Volunteer programs. The images continued page after page. What is all this? Jamal asked. Robert slid several photographs closer. These are students. Jamal nodded. I can see that. Students. People gave up on. The room fell quiet. Robert pointed toward one picture showing a teenage boy receiving a diploma. That kid was arrested twice before turning 16. Another image, a young woman standing beside a university banner. She nearly dropped out during sophomore year. Another, a group photo from a youth leadership conference. Several of them grew up in neighborhoods where graduating high school wasn't considered normal. Jamal studied the photographs carefully. The more he looked, the more he noticed something. Hope. Every image seemed to contain it. Hope restored. Hope protected. Hope earned. Robert leaned back slightly. My organization has spent 15 years helping students who need opportunities. Jamal glanced toward Principal Harper. Even she appeared impressed. Over the next several minutes, Robert explained the scale of the foundation's work. Mentorship programs, college preparation, scholarships, career development, mental health support, community outreach. The organization operated across multiple states and partnered with schools throughout the country. As Robert spoke, Jamal realized just how influential the man sitting across from him actually was. Millions of dollars raised, thousands of students helped, national recognition, television appearances, awards, yet none of that had been visible in the parking lot. There, he had simply looked like an older biker being harassed by 6 teenagers. The contrast felt almost surreal. Finally, Jamal asked the question that had been bothering him. "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" Robert smiled. "Would it have mattered?" Jamal hesitated. Maybe. Maybe not. The older man answered for him. The kind of people who respect others only because of status usually don't respect others at all. The statement lingered in the room. Its simplicity made it powerful. Robert continued. "When those boys approached me, they didn't know anything about me." He paused. "They only knew they thought they could get away with it." Jamal immediately understood. The incident had never been about motorcycles, or appearances, or social status. It was about power. People testing whether they could intimidate someone without consequences. And if Jamal hadn't stepped forward, the answer might have been yes. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Robert opened a second folder. This one looked different. Official. Organized. Important. "I also wanted to tell you something before the media hears about it." Jamal frowned. The media. Robert exchanged a glance with Principal Harper, then smiled. "The video reached several national news producers yesterday." Jamal blinked. "What?" "It wasn't just local stations." The older man's smile widened. 3 national television programs contacted our office." For a second, Jamal thought he had misheard. National television, people across the country. The idea felt impossible. Yet Robert appeared completely serious. And somehow, that wasn't even the biggest surprise waiting for him. Because before the week ended, millions of Americans would learn his name. And one announcement from Robert Hayes would change the direction of his future forever. Jamal thought the viral video was the biggest surprise of his life. He had no idea Robert Hayes was preparing something far bigger. As national networks competed for interviews and the story gained momentum, Robert began planning an announcement that would leave an entire school speechless. By Thursday morning, Lincoln Heights High School had become the center of a story far larger than anyone imagined. News vans occasionally appeared near campus. Reporters contacted parents. Community leaders discussed the viral video during public meetings. Even students who rarely paid attention to current events knew exactly what was happening. Everywhere Jamal went, people were talking about the same thing. The video, the biker, the confrontation, and most importantly, the teenager who stepped in when nobody else would. The attention remained uncomfortable. But what unsettled Jamal most wasn't the publicity, it was the expectations. People suddenly viewed him differently. Teachers praised him. Parents thanked him. Students admired him. The problem was that Jamal still felt like the same person he had been before the video existed. He still worried about exams. Still helped his younger brother with homework. Still worked weekend shifts at the grocery store. Nothing about him felt extraordinary. Yet the world seemed determined to disagree. Meanwhile, across campus, another story was unfolding. Investigators continued reviewing reports connected to Tyler Brooks and his group. The viral video had encouraged students to speak more openly than ever before. Dozens came forward. Some described intimidation. Others described harassment. Several recounted incidents that administrators had never officially documented. Individually, many stories appeared minor. Together, they revealed a troubling pattern. For years, behavior that should have been challenged had often been ignored. Not intentionally, not maliciously, simply because nobody wanted conflict. That realization forced uncomfortable conversations throughout the district. Because bullying rarely becomes powerful on its own. It becomes powerful when enough people decide confronting it is someone else's responsibility. Late Thursday afternoon, Principal Harper made a school-wide announcement. A special assembly would be held the following day. Attendance required. No additional details provided. The announcement triggered immediate speculation. Students filled social media with theories. Some predicted disciplinary announcements. Others expected anti-bullying presentations. A few guessed Robert Hayes would return. Only one group knew the truth. The school administration. Robert Hayes and a small number of foundation representatives helping organize the event. Friday arrived. By 9 o'clock, students packed the gymnasium. Teachers lined the walls. Parents occupied reserved seating near the front. The atmosphere buzzed with curiosity. Nobody seemed entirely sure what to expect. Then Principal Harper stepped onto the stage. The room gradually quieted. After a brief introduction, she welcomed Robert Hayes. Thunderous applause followed. The older man walked confidently to center stage. He thanked the audience, spoke about leadership, spoke about character, spoke about courage. Not dramatic courage, not movie-style heroism. Real courage, the kind ordinary people display when they choose to help someone despite fear. As he spoke, the gymnasium became remarkably quiet. Students listened. Teachers listened. Even those who normally ignored assemblies paid attention. Then Robert's tone shifted. There is someone in this room I'd like to recognize. Instantly, hundreds of eyes moved toward Jamal. His stomach dropped. He already hated where this was going. The audience laughed softly as cameras turned toward him. Robert smiled. Jamal Carter reminded millions of people that courage still exists. Applause erupted. Jamal wished the floor would open beneath him. Instead, Robert continued. What happened outside that convenience store wasn't important because someone became famous. The room quieted. It was important because one student chose responsibility when everyone else chose comfort. The statement landed heavily. Many students lowered their eyes. Others nodded. They understood exactly what he meant. Robert reached for a folder resting on the podium, then looked directly at Jamal. And at that moment, nobody in the gymnasium realized they were about to witness the announcement that would become the most talked about moment in school history. The audience thought Robert Hayes was about to deliver a speech. Instead, he was about to change Jamal's life in front of the entire school. As hundreds of students watched in silence, Robert prepared an announcement that would transform a viral moment into an opportunity. Neither Jamal nor Lincoln Heights would ever forget. For several seconds, the gymnasium remained completely silent. More than 1,000 students sat watching Robert Hayes standing at the podium, waiting to hear whatever announcement had prompted. Such an unusual assembly. Even the teachers seemed uncertain. Robert glanced toward Jamal before opening the folder in his hands. The smile on his face suggested he had been looking forward to this moment for quite some time. Over the past week, he began. Millions of people have watched a short video online. A few students laughed softly. Everyone knew exactly which video he meant. They saw a young man step forward during a situation that most people chose to avoid. The audience remained quiet. They saw courage. Robert paused. But what most people don't know is that courage rarely appears by accident. It comes from character. It comes from values. It comes from the choices people make long before anyone is watching. The gymnasium grew even quieter. Students listened carefully. Because this no longer felt like a speech about a viral video. It felt personal, meaningful, real. Robert continued. My organization works with thousands of teenagers every year. We meet students with extraordinary talent, students with remarkable intelligence, students with incredible potential. He paused again. But character remains the rarest quality of all. The statement seemed to settle over the room. Then Robert looked directly at Jamal. Which brings me to today's announcement. A wave of anticipation moved through the audience. Several students sat forward. Teachers exchanged curious glances. Even Principal Harper appeared excited. Robert reached into the folder and removed a document. Then he smiled. Earlier this week, our foundation's board voted unanimously. The room fell silent. Jamal Carter has been selected to receive the Hayes National Leadership Scholarship. Gasps echoed across the gymnasium. The name alone sounded important. Robert wasn't finished. The scholarship includes a full educational grant, leadership, mentorship opportunities, internship placements, and funding support through 4 years of college. For a moment, nobody reacted. The information seemed too large to process. Then reality caught up. The gymnasium exploded. Applause thundered through the building. Students jumped to their feet. Teachers followed. Parents joined them. Within seconds, nearly everyone in attendance was standing. The ovation seemed endless. Jamal sat frozen. His face revealed complete disbelief. He hadn't expected recognition. He certainly hadn't expected something that could alter his future. For several moments, he simply stared at Robert, then at Principal Harper, then back toward the audience. The noise continued, louder than ever. Across the gym, students who barely knew Jamal cheered as enthusiastically as close friends. Because deep down, many understood what this moment represented. The scholarship wasn't a reward for fighting. It wasn't a reward for becoming famous. It was recognition for doing the right thing when it would have been easier to do nothing. Eventually, Robert motioned for Jamal to join him on stage. The walk felt unreal. Thousands of eyes followed him. Cameras flashed. Applause continued. When Jamal finally reached the podium, Robert handed him the official scholarship certificate. Another wave of cheers erupted. Then something unexpected happened. Robert stepped aside. Giving Jamal access to the microphone, the audience immediately quieted. Many assumed he would deliver a prepared speech. Others expected something dramatic. Instead, Jamal stood there for several seconds trying to gather his thoughts. Finally, he spoke. I don't really know what to say. The honesty drew laughter. His shoulders relaxed slightly. I appreciate this. More than I can explain. He paused, looking across the crowd. Students, teachers, parents, friends, even people who had ignored him for years. Then he continued, the truth is, I wasn't trying to be a hero. The gym became completely silent. I saw someone who needed help. Another pause. And I thought someone should do something. The simplicity of the statement hit harder than any rehearsed speech could have. Because everyone knew what came next. The uncomfortable truth. Jamal smiled slightly. So I guess I decided that someone might as well be me. Silence lingered for a second. Then the audience erupted again, even louder than before. Because millions of people had watched the video. But in that moment, everyone present finally understood why it mattered. The story was never about a biker, or a viral clip, or even a scholarship. It was about responsibility. The willingness to act when action was necessary. As the assembly concluded, students slowly filed out of the gym. Most continued talking about the announcement. Others discussed Jamal's speech. But a different conversation was also beginning to spread throughout the school. One involving Tyler Brooks and the ongoing investigation. Because while Jamal's future appeared brighter than ever, Tyler's situation was moving in the opposite direction. And the consequences were finally catching up. As Jamal received national recognition for his actions, investigators were uncovering evidence that threatened to change Tyler's future forever. The viral video may have started the conversation, but what investigators discovered afterward would force Lincoln Heights to confront a much deeper problem. The week following the assembly proved to be the most uncomfortable period in Lincoln Heights High School's recent history. Not because of Jamal, not because of Robert Hayes, and not because of the viral video. The discomfort came from something far more difficult. Truth. By then, the district's review had expanded significantly. What initially began as an examination of one public confrontation had evolved into a broader investigation into student conduct and school culture. Administrators interviewed students, teachers submitted reports, parents shared concerns. Former students even contacted the district to describe experiences from previous years. The volume of information surprised everyone, including investigators. Again and again, similar stories emerged. A hallway incident never formally reported. A student who transferred schools after months of harassment. A complaint dismissed as harmless teenage behavior, an intimidation tactic that never crossed the threshold of official discipline but clearly caused harm. Individually, the incidents seemed minor. Together, they revealed a pattern, and patterns are difficult to ignore. Meanwhile, Tyler Brooks spent most days avoiding attention. The shift was dramatic. Only weeks earlier, students moved aside when he walked through hallways. Now many avoided him entirely. Not out of fear, out of disappointment. The difference mattered. Reputation can take years to build. Sometimes it takes only days to lose. For the first time, Tyler began experiencing something many of his targets had endured for years. Isolation. The irony wasn't lost on him, nor was it lost on the students around him. Across campus, conversations about bullying became more honest. Teachers addressed issues more directly. Students spoke up more frequently. Several peer support groups reported increased participation. The culture wasn't transforming overnight, but it was changing. And that change had started because one moment forced people to examine what they had previously ignored. One afternoon, Principal Harper met privately with several district officials. The findings were becoming increasingly clear. The problem at Lincoln Heights had never been a lack of rules. The rules existed. The problem had been inconsistency. Too many warning signs overlooked. Too many incidents minimized. Too many opportunities missed. Corrective measures were already being discussed. New reporting systems, additional training, expanded student support programs. Real change, not symbolic change. The kind that requires effort. That evening, Jamal sat at home helping Malik study for a math test. For the first time in weeks, life felt relatively normal. No cameras, no interviews, no assemblies. Just homework at the kitchen table. And honestly, he preferred it that way. He never wanted attention. He never wanted recognition. What he wanted was simple. For people to treat each other better. The fact that millions of strangers seemed inspired by the same idea still felt difficult to believe. Yet outside his home, the story continued growing. Because the investigation was approaching its conclusion, and when the final report became public, the impact would extend far beyond Lincoln Heights High School. Months of ignored behavior were finally being exposed. The question was no longer whether change was needed, but how much change was coming. As investigators prepared their final report, students throughout Lincoln Heights waited to learn what accountability would actually look like. By early spring, nearly 6 weeks had passed since the confrontation outside the convenience store. The viral attention had finally begun to slow. News outlets shifted their focus to other stories. Social media moved on to newer trends. Television interviews became less frequent. The constant stream of public attention that once surrounded Lincoln Heights High School gradually faded into the background. But inside the district, the consequences of that single afternoon continued unfolding. The investigation had reached its final stage. Administrators, school board members, community representatives, and independent reviewers spent weeks examining reports, interviews, disciplinary records, and witness statements. What they uncovered confirmed what many students had quietly known for years. The confrontation involving Tyler Brooks and his friends was never an isolated incident. It was simply the first incident large enough for the entire community to see. When the final report was completed, district officials scheduled a special board meeting. The turnout exceeded expectations. Parents filled the auditorium. Teachers occupied entire rows. Students attended alongside community leaders and local media representatives. Many expected disciplinary updates. Few anticipated the scale of what would be revealed. The report outlined a pattern of behavior stretching back several academic years. Repeated intimidation, unreported harassment, incidents that should have triggered intervention but instead received minimal attention, failures in communication, missed opportunities to support vulnerable students. The findings were uncomfortable, yet they were necessary, because meaningful change rarely begins with comfort. It begins with honesty. Several policy reforms were announced immediately. Anonymous reporting systems would be expanded. Staff training requirements would increase. Student support resources would receive additional funding. Procedures for documenting harassment complaints would be strengthened. More importantly, school leaders publicly acknowledged their mistakes. For many families, that admission mattered. Accountability felt different when institutions accepted responsibility rather than avoiding it. The student disciplinary findings were also significant. Tyler Brooks and several members of his group faced long-term consequences based on the investigation's conclusions. Participation in extracurricular activities was restricted. Leadership positions were revoked. Additional disciplinary measures varied according to individual involvement and prior conduct. Some community members argued the consequences were too severe. Others believed they were overdue. Regardless of opinion, one reality remained clear. Actions had consequences. And for perhaps the first time, students throughout Lincoln Heights saw that principle applied consistently. Meanwhile, Tyler found himself confronting something unfamiliar. Reflection. Over the previous months, he had lost opportunities, friendships, and much of the reputation he once valued. The experience forced him to examine choices he had spent years justifying. No dramatic transformation occurred overnight. Life rarely works that way. But several teachers later noted a change in his behavior. Quieter, more thoughtful, less interested in impressing others. Whether the change would last remained uncertain. Yet the possibility existed, and sometimes accountability creates opportunities for growth that comfort never can. Across campus, Jamal continued adjusting to a life that felt surprisingly normal again. The scholarship remained one of the most significant opportunities he had ever received. College no longer felt like a distant dream. Leadership programs introduced him to students from across the country. Mentors helped him explore future career paths. Doors that once seemed closed suddenly stood open. Yet despite everything that had happened, Jamal remained remarkably unchanged. He still spent afternoons helping Malik with homework, still worked part-time on weekends, still preferred quiet conversations over attention. The people who knew him best often joked that national recognition had done absolutely nothing to alter his personality. The joke wasn't entirely wrong. One afternoon, Robert Hayes visited the school once more. Not for interviews, not for publicity, simply to check on students participating in mentorship programs created after the incident. Before leaving, he found Jamal near the football field. The two walked together for several minutes. Eventually, Robert smiled. "You know, most people think this story was about you saving me." Jamal laughed softly. "Wasn't it?" Robert shook his head. "No." The older man glanced toward the school building. "It was about reminding people they have choices." Jamal considered the statement. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The story had never been about strength. It had never been about fame. It had never been about becoming a hero. It was about a decision. One ordinary decision made in an ordinary moment. A decision that inspired others to make better choices themselves. And perhaps that was why the story resonated so deeply. Because everyone eventually faces moments when doing nothing feels easier. The real question is what happens next. The investigation was over. The consequences had been delivered. And life was moving forward. Yet one final chapter remained before the story could truly come to an end. As the school year approached its conclusion, Lincoln Heights prepared to celebrate its graduating seniors, including one student whose actions had changed the entire community. 3 months later, the school year was drawing to a close. Warm sunlight replaced winter mornings, and Lincoln Heights High School buzzed with the familiar excitement that always accompanied graduation season. Seniors discussed college plans. Families prepared for ceremonies. Teachers rushed to finish final lessons before summer arrived. For Jamil Carter, life felt very different than it had at the beginning of the year. Yet in many ways, it felt exactly the same. He still arrived early to class, still avoided unnecessary attention, still preferred helping others rather than talking about himself. The difference was that people now recognized those qualities, not because of a viral video, because they had learned to value them. During the school's annual Leadership Awards ceremony, Principal Harper addressed the graduating class. Many expected her to discuss academic achievements or athletic accomplishments. Instead, she spoke about character, about responsibility, about the importance of acting when something is wrong. Without mentioning the convenience store incident directly, everyone understood the message. When she invited Jamal onto the stage for a final recognition, the auditorium erupted into applause. The standing ovation lasted nearly a minute. Jamal smiled awkwardly, just as he always did whenever attention found him. Some things never changed. Later that evening, students gathered outside the school to celebrate the approaching end of the year. Friends laughed together. Photographs were taken. Memories were shared. For a while, Jamal stood quietly observing the scene. Then Malik walked beside him. "You know," his younger brother said, "people still talk about what you did." Jamal smiled. "They'll forget eventually." Malik shook his head. "I don't think that's the part they'll remember." Jamal looked at him curiously. "What part?" Then his brother thought for a moment. "The part where you didn't walk away." For several seconds, neither spoke, because deep down, both understood the truth. The story that captured national attention was never really about a biker. It wasn't about scholarships. It wasn't about viral videos. It was about choice. The choice to step forward when others stepped back. The choice to help when helping felt inconvenient. The choice to do the right thing despite uncertainty. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, Jamal looked toward the future. College awaited. New opportunities awaited. New challenges awaited. But whatever happened next, one lesson would remain with him forever. Courage doesn't belong only to extraordinary people. Sometimes it belongs to ordinary people who decide that someone else's well-being matters more than their own comfort. And sometimes, that decision can change far more lives than anyone ever expects. Thank you for listening to this story. The events at Lincoln Heights High School remind us that courage is not always loud, dramatic, or extraordinary. More often, it appears in quiet moments when ordinary people are faced with a choice. A choice to intervene, to speak up, or simply to refuse to look away. Jamal Carter did not act because he expected recognition. He acted because someone needed help. That simple decision became a powerful reminder that character is revealed, not when people are watching, but when doing the right thing comes with personal risk. Bullying and intimidation thrive when silence becomes normal. Yet even one person willing to stand up can inspire countless others to do the same. Change rarely begins with large movements. It often begins with a single act of courage. Thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time, remember that the choices we make in ordinary moments often define who we become. Take care of yourselves, and take care of one another.